Hey, welcome back, Donald Miller. I want to talk about materials. Electrical materials matter, especially if you're installing recessed lighting, dimmers, LED light bulbs. All three of them are extremely important. And it's one of the things that big builders and renovations and even like standard electricians, either they don't understand or they don't care. A big builder goes by a photometric reading of the light, okay, and it gives a foot candle reading on the floor. I'm not going to go into it too much, but they go by square footage of the house, and then they put their recessed lights everywhere. But they're not, all they are is filling the floor with light, because recessed lights, in order to get a recessed light to look really nice, you have to place them in the correct position. If you're just going by square footage, you're just illuminating the floor. We can get into designing with recessed lights later, but so when you get into recessed lights, okay, the product, the actual company that produces the recessed light, it matters what product you use. If you go like super cheap, the socket's not adjustable a lot of times, okay? With recessed lighting, depending on the effect you're trying to do, you want to either usually you want to raise that socket as high as possible in the can, and then you use the trim to reflect your light. And if it's a cheap company, the trim's going to suck, and the recessed light housing is going to suck. And when people are bidding jobs, they're not telling the homeowner or whoever's buying the product what they're putting in. A lot of times these guys, especially if they're not electricians, they're buying this junk from box stores, and they're buying junk off the internet. There's so many places you can get a cheap recessed light that any light is going to be better than no light. So if you use cheap lights, okay, if you're putting them into a room that doesn't have any light at all, it's going to look nice, okay, but you're not getting the best bang for the dollar, and you don't realize that, because you don't realize how good of a quality of light you can get. All right, so I personally use Juno. Okay, Juno makes an awesome can. They're adjustable within, and the trim reflects a light so much better than some of these other companies. And Juno actually has a higher end company called Aculux. Aculux, you can actually measure the degree of angle you want that socket to sit in. It actually has calibration tools inside the can. Now those cans are expensive. I'm not stating everyone should use Aculux, but Juno does make a very nice product. I'm not paid by Juno. Juno's not helping me in any way. This is based on experience. Whenever we do lighting designs, we always use Juno. We will not go cheaper, and we'll explain to the homeowner why. There's not a big difference in price. On average, you're probably spending $15 more per can. So that's my recessed light opinion. Now, lighting, the light color, okay, so when you get into light color, like office lighting is 6,000 degree Kelvin. It's degrees of Kelvin that measure the color temperature, okay? So office lighting is usually like 5,000 or 6,000 degree Kelvin, where a regular light bulb in your house, like an old incandescent, that's considered 2,700 degree Kelvin. When you deal with recessed light, when you deal with LED lights, okay, if you go cheap on your LED, you're going to get weird color variations. It's going to be green sometimes, or the light doesn't spread correctly. Like these retrofit LED, you can get a retrofit now for, if you have a recessed light, you can get this LED socket that you screw in, and it's not a bulb, it's actually part of it. It just is a flat surface that's illuminated. They're great for light output, but they're horrible for designs. Like you can't accent correctly with them. They throw a boatload of light, and it's very glary. It doesn't reflect correctly, so you're not getting any indirect lighting design from it. You're getting direct lighting, and when you do lighting designs or you use recessed lights, indirect light is awesome. I recommend designing with indirect rather than direct. Indirect light is like reflecting off the trim or reflecting off the wall to produce an atmosphere. Okay. And these retrofit cans that people are putting in, they're good for illumination, but they're horrible for designs. And people need to realize that if you're going for a design, if you want recessed lights in your home, the bulb and the housing are very important. The placement of the bulb as well. So when you go and you buy these LEDs, okay, and even though they say they're dimmable, that doesn't mean it's good. Some of these dimmable LEDs don't even make it a year before they start flickering. And then when you dim them, they change from like a nice yellow light and they change to like a weird hue. And it just throws your eye off. Sometimes they don't all dim uniformly. And I understand it has to do with the dimmer as well, but it's not always just the dimmer, okay? There's more to it. Okay, when we deal with LEDs, now I like Green Creative. Green Creative is an LED company that produces a very nice spectrum of light. You get like your 2700 degree Kelvin upwards up to, I don't know how high they go. I usually use 2700 or 3000 degree Kelvin. They're the two color temperatures that I like. And when we use them, we're setting them in the socket a certain way, okay, in the housing of the recessed light, and we're using the trim a lot, okay. The trim's important as much as like the LED light. Now when you dim them, you want to make sure you're dimming with a CL dimmer, okay. It's a special dimmer that knows how to dim LED drivers, okay. And I know they're making all these dimmable LEDs, but that doesn't mean it's a good product, okay? The product is what's gonna really make whatever you're getting done. What's the point of spending $800 or $900 on a lighting design if the product itself sucks? And especially with certain like cheap trims, they start turning off colors. They start turning yellow or they're shiny, because even though you're spending that $800, the electrician or the builder decided to go cheap on his materials, and you know he now all of a sudden you have this shiny recessed light. The bulb doesn't sit right. It looks really weird. And then when you go and you see a real lighting design done correctly, you're like, why doesn't my house look like that? And it's the product that they're putting in. And so here's the thing. Here's a dirty little secret. They're marking up the cheap products. They're telling you it's quality, and they're putting in junk, and they're marking it up like 300%. I was just at a service call yesterday where the heater, they had an exhaust fan / heater, and it was made by a cheap company, bought at a box store, and it looked big. But you turned it on, and the CFM, cubic feet of air per minute of the exhaust fan, it was very loud. Okay, the zones were high, and then the heater itself, the squirrel, it was like a miniature squirrel cage motor inside of it, and it just put out like just nasty heat. It wasn't very comfortable. Well, you open up the exhaust fan cover, and even though it looked big, there are little tiny motors in there. And again, that's the electrician buying crappy products and selling them at a higher rate. So what we went in and put a Panasonic in. Panasonic's Whisper. The Whisper is a great product. So we put in a Whisper exhaust fan, and it had a heat combo. And it worked great. All right. So at all said and done, at the end of the day, the heat came out not forcefully, but it was a nice radiant heat. Okay, it did have a fan, so it is blowing it down a little bit. Okay, and then it also had a great exhaust fan that was very quiet. The product was decent. They're spending the money on the labor, so you might as well give them the option to have a decent product. as a quality electrician, we should be talking to the homeowner and explaining to them, hey, this product costs this much, this product costs this much. Here's all the pros, here are the cons, and let them decide what to purchase. These recessed lights that are junk, and you're spending like around here, people are charging $150, $200 per recessed light, but they're buying junk. And when you buy junk, you're gonna get, it'll look nice in the beginning because, again, any light is better than no light. But as time wears on and you start seeing, if you go into another person's house that had a lighting design done by me, it's going to look completely different. The placement of the can is going to be the placement of the recessed light in the ceiling, it's going to be different. The trims that I use are going to be different. The bulbs I use are going to be different, and the dimmers I use are going to be different. I'm not buying a dimmer from a local hardware store. I'm going to an electrical supply house and buying a quality dimmer. All right, that's important. That dimmer is basically telling that bulb what to do. And if the dimmer's junk, the bulb's not going to listen. It's going to start flickering, or you're going to get some really off colors if it's a junk bulb. So materials matter, especially like even GFIs. Okay, if you buy like a GFI from a bad box store, okay, that GFI, it might not work after a year. All right, especially if it's an outdoor GFI that does get a lot of moisture and it trips. It's going to go bad so quick that you're gonna regret putting it in, and that's the worst decision you can. If you regret hiring someone to do something, I feel bad for you, because you should never regret quality work. Okay, but it comes down to a relationship between the electrician and the homeowner, and if the homeowner is educated, then he'll know what products that he would want. Like Juno's good. They're Aculux, decent. Lutron for around the Pennsylvania area. Lutron's really nice. Panasonic's nice. Hubbell used to make GFIs. I don't know if Hubbell makes them anymore. I believe it's Cooper makes a decent GFI, but just because you're getting bids, don't let your electricians cheap out on the materials, and don't let them mark them up either. If he's marking up materials, you should be able to know. All right, so that's my whole thing on it. We personally don't mark up materials. If it's a material that we have to go and drive to get, and it requires a lot of time, there might be a time markup, but we're not marking up materials. We don't make a profit on our materials. I know business practice states that, make a profit wherever you can, but I would rather my customer get a decent material at cost and let them buy the best material possibly they can afford, because it'll make my design look that much better. All right. And I'm all about the quality of my work. I love a good lighting design. Be careful of under cabinet lighting. These strip LEDs, if it's a bad strip LED, they're going to start going on you, and you're not able to replace them. You have to rip the whole thing out, especially tape lighting. Tape LED lighting, you have to be careful what company you're using for it, okay? Supply houses usually know this. If you talk to a decent lighting supply house, they'll steer you in the right direction, not just for their profit, but so you're a happy consumer. Rittenhouse Electric Supply in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, they know their stuff. They can point you in the right direction. All right, thanks for watching. It's Wednesday. Have a good Wednesday. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.